So, Joe, thanks for joining us. So, Joe, when was it that you first realised that you could make other people laugh? Was it the old schoolyard thing?
Yeah, I suppose it was. It's a defensive thing, I think. There's always the bully, isn't there? And I think there's a need to compensate for that in some way. And with me, it was always just making the other kids laugh.
You had trouble with authority at school, didn't you?
Well, not initially. We shifted when I was about 11 and I went to a new school, had to make new friends, which is always difficult. And there was a teacher there who made every attempt to goad me into insurrection so I could be punished within the law. In fact, I think if I'm on about anything, it's injustice.
Do you remember anything in particular that you did in those days?
Well, a guy who is now a meat wholesaler and I once put a big sack of flour in the school air conditioning during the annual reenactment of the Easter Passion, which was very good.
If we can talk now about some of those really sort of Joe things, you know, the mannerisms, the little bits of verbal business that everybody hears and thinks, well, that's Joe.
Yeah, you're thinking particularly of the goodness me's and the don't you worry about that's and so on?
Yes, exactly.
The apparent confusion?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that was there very early.
They say there's a fine line between comedy and tragedy. I mean, do you believe that?
My word.
Are you the sad clown, the commedia dell'arte clown, would you say?
Well, I think I'm a very Australian clown.
Yes.
I think I'm a very Australian clown.
Which joke would you consider to be the joke of all the ones you've performed?
I suppose my favourite would be when I stood for Prime Minister.
Well, that certainly was my personal favourite.
Was it?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thanks. No, well, I always thought that was pretty funny.
Why do you think it worked so well?
Aside from anything else, nobody had tried it previously when there wasn't an election on.
Yes,
I mean, that was pretty funny. I mean, no election on. I stood for Prime Minister when there wasn't an election on.
Yes.
That was pretty funny.
Yes.
I mean, you've got to say that's pretty funny. Then there was an election on, and where was I?
Disneyland.
Disneyland. Pretty funny.
Yes.
You've got to say that's pretty funny.
That's great.
I mean, I got very lucky with the timing. There's no election on and I'm standing for Prime Minister, then there is an election and I'm in Disneyland. Speaking of me personal catastrophe. Pretty funny.
Yes,
pretty funny. Got very lucky. Couldn't believe my luck.
Couldn't believe your luck.
No, literally on a plate.
So, Joe, thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you. You've been a wonderful audience.